Do you ever notice how nobody ever says, they just don't make content like this anymore? They say movies, and that is a very big difference because movies used to feel like they mattered, like they were going to be around long after an opening weekend. And tonight, we're going to talk about why that is. Because for many of us, there's always that moment that happens too often now that never used to happen, where you're flipping through streaming menus, hundreds of options, movies and content everywhere, and yet you never land on anything. Then you end up putting on something like Jaws or Indiana Jones or Back to the Future or Die Hard or a comfort horror movie, something you've seen dozens and dozens of times, and suddenly it's an hour and a half or 2 hours later and you were locked in. No scrolling, no distractions, no half watching, no background content, just watching and enjoying. And that's usually when that sentence comes out. They just don't make movies like this anymore. And this isn't just nostalgia blindness. This isn't just getting older. This is a real shift in how movies are made, why they are made, and what they are meant to be. And it makes us think of that sentence to ourselves and say it out loud, sometimes to other people. Sometimes it's casually, sometimes it's with real frustration, but it always comes out. They just don't make movies like this anymore. And usually we say it while we're rewatching something we've seen countless times, something we know by heart, and something that still works decades later. And it's because if you look at all of those films, they mattered. Whether it's Indiana Jones, The Thing, Back to the Future, all of those classics, you're not just looking at old films, you're looking at artifacts from a system in Hollywood that does not exist anymore. A time when studios trusted filmmakers, when movies were designed to last, when taking a risk wasn't a dirty word or a dirty thing to say. And yes, sometimes the movies were allowed to be a little weird, a little strange, a little rough around the edges to where they needed time and maybe a old VHS copy to find their audiences. But they existed and they're still in our conscience today. And these movies are why. Let's start with Jaws. This movie didn't just scare people, it changed people's behavior. People stopped going into the ocean. There's actually a psychological name for this. It's called the Jaws effect. It had such a cultural impact. But what made Jaws work wasn't just the shark. It was restraint, suspense, craft. Spielberg used real locations, natural light, long takes, silence, POVs, the idea of what you don't see. And because the shark didn't work, the movie actually got better. Limitations, if you understand them and you understand how to work around them, do not kill creativity. They create it. They force it. That's a recurring theme with movies then versus movies now. Movies then created icons. You hear me talk about it a lot of times. You hear the word iconic when it refers to 70s films, 80s films, 90s films, so on. Back there, you hear iconic. It's an iconic movie, an iconic character. Look at Indiana Jones. This wasn't a movie designed to launch a cinematic universe. It wasn't chasing a trend. It became a trend. Real stunts, real danger, an homage to stuff that came before it, the old serials, real dirt under the fingernails of actors. Harrison Ford bleeds. He looked exhausted because he was exhausted. They were on location doing 30, 40 setups a day in the Tunisian sun. He was ill with the whole crew was ill from food that they had eaten. He fails. He reacts like a real human being. And that physicality, that tactile experience, that relatability, it all adds to the realism. It pulls us in. It matters. When you know something is real, even subconsciously, you lean in harder. That's part of the problem with the very digital green screen filmmaking today. There's something in our minds that knows it's not real, that those people are not there. And while we all recognize that films are make believe no matter what, there's something different when you watch a film like Indiana Jones and you know they were in the desert. You know that sunset is real, the silhouetted shot. All of that stuff is real. The sweat is real. The dirt is real. All of it is real. Every setup pays off. It's engineered with care. Every character matters. Every joke has a purpose. Every look, every bead of sweat, something that we never get anymore. Characters never sweat. Their worlds don't look lived in. Modern movies often assume the viewers are going to be distracted when they watch. So they overemphasize telling you what's happening again and again. Everything is lit even, so you're not confused as to where you are in the story. It's lit even so that they can change the background later. And because that way you can half pay attention while scrolling and you don't get confused. But because of that, it loses so much. Nobody cares about rewatching something they only paid halfway attention to the first time because it was just background content. Movies like Indiana Jones, the realism, you felt like you could go and walk around in those same areas that Indy was in. And because of that, these movies reward attention, engagement, and endless rewatches. And we talked about risk. Listen, not every movie hit like it was supposed to, not even what we consider the iconic classics today. You take The Thing by John Carpenter. This is a studio film that's bleak, paranoid, violent, uncomfortable, open-ended, isolated, cold. And it came out at a time when E.T. was ruling the box office, so it just didn't work even then. But the studio took the risk. They trusted a filmmaker. It actually hurt the filmmaker for a little bit, but because of that risk, because of everything that went into the film, the real locations, they're in real snow, having to get there by snowmobiles to set back and forth each day. These men look like real men. They don't look like they were brought off an assembly line checking boxes of every beautiful model. They look like real men that would be in this place together. They sweat, they bleed, they're rough looking, they're not changing clothes. All of that stuff comes together in this movie, exists because of those risks, because of that reality. Now, it didn't hit then, but as it got to VHS, it found its audience. That's something else that we do not allow time for today. We don't allow films to take a risk and find the audience they're looking for so that they can grow beyond what they were originally intended to be. It just never happens. Everything now is a safety net. It's done by focus groups with their check boxes. There's no risk taking. It's just all very homogenous. It all looks the same and feels the same. Back then, though, we had atmosphere, risks, dread. Every movie looked different. It felt different. You were in a different world. Same with Die Hard. Die Hard is possibly one of the tightest, if not the tightest, action script in history. It is often duplicated. It started a thing in Hollywood. It's Die Hard on a bus, speed. It's Die Hard here. It's Die Hard there. Because it was so well done, yet so simple. But this movie was also very relatable, even in an extremely crazy situation. You had family and marriage problems. You had corporate greed. You had, criminals, vulnerability, fighting for survival. John McClane was not a superhero. This movie, he's trapped in one building and there's a lot of tension. He's tired, he's bleeding, he's scared. It's full of humanity, and that's what makes it so much different. He's not just a superhero throwing people this way and that, coated in plot armor with all of these grand locations that don't exist anywhere except for in a computer. And that's what people forget, the range. Every movie looked and felt different. It took you somewhere else. And not all of them were big budgets. You had films like The Beastmaster. So in the same era where you had these great iconic films like Back to the Future, Star Wars, Indiana Jones, on and on and on, you would get The Beastmaster by Don Coscarelli, a movie that had to live on cable and TV and VHS to find its audience. It literally became a memory for more people before they recognized it as a great cult film. It's very messy, it's crazy, sword and sorcery, epic, done on a small budget. It didn't have to be perfect though, it just needed to be felt and experienced. Then you have something like Robocop, which hits the other end of the spectrum. It had a decent budget, but it was a really pulpy action, sci-fi, almost horror thriller film that was kind of hard to take. It was a studio movie that was R-rated, that was brutal, violent, satirical, but also funny and disturbing, and the satire was just so overwhelming by Paul Verhoeven. But still, this movie played in countless multiplexes. It drew a huge audience. It spawned off video games for kids, despite the fact this was an R-rated film. That range, that coexistence of all of these different types of movies that still all blended together and found audiences at the same time, that is gone. Everything feels the same. It looks the same. It's supposed to be standardized to not be offensive to this person or that person. There are no risks. There's not even any risks in the filming. The backgrounds are all evenly lit. Mostly they're green screen. That way they can change their mind at any point, change the background, change what the actor's wearing, change the lighting. And so you get this sort of generic feeling where every movie looks the same. All the shots are the same. Nobody shoots wide anymore because they don't want to show all that, and they sure don't want to show it in focus because they may want to replace it later with a generic CGI background. So this world that we lived in where every movie was its own thing, it had its own look, its own feel, its own mise en scène, everything about it, and you went into those worlds and it was like taking a trip to a different place. All of that is gone now. Every movie feels the same and looks the same. And in that same era, we had the movies that were truly offensive, and that was the point of them, the midnight type movies. Not just horror movies, but movies like From Beyond that weren't meant to be mainstream, not ever. And it was okay, they were still made, they still had funding. They were meant to be discovered over time to find their audience. That's why video stores mattered. Late night cable TV mattered. These are where movies like From Beyond or Reanimator, things like that, where they found their people and those people could come together and share that. And then you had a whole other branch of films that were never mainstream, but they became so beloved and so popular within this subculture of cult film lovers that they became mainstream, and they're still standing the test of time later. Again, you would never get that today. It just doesn't happen. The same with the old B action movie like Roadhouse, maybe the greatest B action movie ever made. This movie works because even though it's a crazy premise and it's got all of this nutso 80s action going on, it believes in itself. There's no irony, no apology. It's not like trying to wink at the camera or anything like that. It says, this is what we are, and we're going for it, and it commits to its tone 100%, where a modern movie, they would never be that sincere. They can't do it. They're afraid of sincerity. They undercut themselves with jokes. They're always got to be, we got to apologize and make a joke on ourselves before anybody can judge us. That's what the movies do now. So it's constantly taking you out of any real situation, and it's just something older movies did not do. They stood there and said, this is what we are. This is a crazy, fun action movie, and we're going all the way with it. It's 100% real in this world. Enjoy it. You're never going to get that today, and that's another piece that's lost and why movies today are so forgettable and disposable by comparison. So you ask, what changed? Well, here is the uncomfortable truth, and I've touched on a lot of this. Movies stopped being made to last and started being made to trend and to be safe. The mid-budget movie vanished. It completely vanished. As streaming rose, and that killed the video rental store, and it really hurt physical media sales, the medium budget movies, they went away because they cannot make their budgets back. They needed those revenue windows that are gone. Matt Damon has famously talked about this.
Well, so what happened was the DVD was a huge part of our business, of our revenue stream. And so the movies that we used to make, you could afford to not make all of your money when it played in the theater because you knew you had the DVD coming behind the release. And 6 months later, you'd get a whole nother chunk. It would be like reopening the movie almost. And when that went away, that changed the type of movies that we could make.
So when the mid-budget movies vanish, when the other outlets for films to discover their audience and create new revenue vanishes, movies change. Studios stop taking risk. They stop trying to develop icons, and they try to go back and cash in on old icons. So risk became something to completely avoid instead of manage. So now in their book, success just usually means familiar IP, nostalgia leverage, remakes, reboots, and legacy sequels. That's what they have because they need to make all of their money really quick at the box office, and that's it. That's all they have. And even when one of those movies hits, when it does work, they're usually leaning on something that already existed. Usually something from the 70s, 80s, 90s, or something iconic, an old Disney IP, a Star Wars IP, a 80s movie IP. They're leaning on something like that. So they're borrowing cultural relevance and cultural staying power in order to try to make something today rather than to create their own. And that is a huge problem. And I touched on it a little bit, but the actual filmmaking itself has changed. And I'm going to do a whole video on this because that is a big part of the issue too. Films used to be shot on location. They really were. They used real locations. They used miniatures. That is a lost art. Building miniatures that really help sell things in a real, tangible way rather than on a computer. They used practical effects, other in-camera tricks, the ingenuity, the creativity, things that were stumbled upon that are still used today, but mostly it's just replaced with a computer. And even if those effects were imperfect, they were still tangible. So when you watch those movies today, they hold up. Whereas if you watch a movie for when CGI first took over, it's very dated. It does not hold up the same way. Digital replaces texture and feel and realism. CGI replaces the weight of any scene. You don't feel like anybody is under any kind of pressure or real situation because it's something in your mind says, well, I know they're just in front of a screen. And all of that is because they're wanting to do it with speed. That replaced patience and the real art of filmmaking. And like I said, that's a whole conversation, and we'll get there, because coming up, I'm going to do deeper dives into why movies don't feel and look the same anymore. That's going to be a video. And we're going to dive into why practical effects made 80s movies immortal, and we're really going to get into it then. And all of those things are why these movies still matter. These movies survived because they were bold, distinct, very much from each other, but also they still felt like they belonged together. They were very human, physical, touchable, feelable. They were made with intention and craftsmanship and artistry that we do not see today. They were not chasing relevance. They became relevant through the creation of the art. They trusted the audiences to grow with them. And that's why we still return to them all of these years later. That's why Hollywood still tries to cash in on them all of these years later. It's not just for nostalgia, it's for the connection that we just don't have. But there is hope. This isn't about saying movies are completely dead. I am not saying that. It's about remembering what worked. Because when filmmakers are trusted, when they really get in there and roll up their sleeves and use creativity, when studios take chances, when movies are allowed to be sincere without it being cringe or self-referential, that magic, that movie-making magic, the old smoke and mirrors, all of it, the Hollywood of our nostalgic memories can exist again. But until then, we have to keep these films alive because they earned it. So that's what I've got for you this time, and we have more coming up, just like I said, but I want to know what makes you say they don't make movies like this anymore. That moment, what makes you say in that moment when you're scrolling, you know, they just don't make a movie like this anymore. I want to know, so let me know in the comments what movies trigger that for you. If you're watching an old movie and you say that, or you're watching a new movie that is got all those problems we mentioned, you say, man, they just don't make movies like they used to. I want to know the movies that do that for you, and we have a big discussion ahead of us and lots more to go, and I hope you enjoy it. If you did, please like and subscribe. That really helps out the channel. We do all kinds of things here, big nostalgic deep dives into filmmaking and movie history, movie lists, recommendations and rankings, all of that kind of stuff, and I hope you'll hang around for it. If you'd like to support what we're doing here a little bit more, you can join my Patreon. The link is in the description. You'll get behind the scenes looks at my filmmaking. You'll get your name and lights on every single video. You'll get my looks at 4K reviews and physical media deep dives, all that kind of stuff, and so much more, and everything supports this channel and our growth here. We are trying to reach more and more people and bring them into the AVA pop culture family and spread the word that we love movies and pop culture. Until next time, be kind, rewind like always. This is Chase with AV Pop Culture, and I'll see you real soon. Bye-bye. Bye now.